This video is by Straight Goods News. SGNews.ca.
The opportunity that we have collectively as First Nations and as the Government of Canada and as Canadians is to harness that energy, into doing the hard work. We as First Nations are prepared to do that hard work. We have the real solutions. We are seeking and coming forward on Friday with real fundamental outcomes that we're seeking from the Prime Minister and his government. And as Regional Chief Bellegarde indicated, we've had substantive conversations with our leadership, as well as our citizens right across the country, in terms of what it is that we're seeking by way of outcomes. In terms of implementation of treaties, recognition of Aboriginal title and rights, and a consistent, ongoing political process developing a new machinery of government through the Prime Minister's office or the PCO that will oversee the transformation and the commitments through these two processes. And we are also at the direction of our leadership and from the calls of our citizens in terms of the Budget Implementation Acts, former Bill C-38 and 45, looking to the federal government to review the code of conduct that has occurred with respect to the development of its economic development policies, and whether or not the duty to consult our nations, which we allege, has not been complied with. We would look to the federal government to develop, support, in conjunction with our nations, a federal environmental protection regime that, in fact, protects our environment and protects our water. With respect to the legislative agenda, we seek to ensure that there's a process in place where our nations are involved in any legislation that's drafted, that any legislation that is currently before Parliament or introduced is in compliance with Section 35, and that the federal government, in terms of governance, seeks to support our nation-building efforts in this period of profound transition, and look to developing with our nations a mechanism where our nations are ready, willing, and able to move beyond the Indian Act, that the federal government supports that and does not stand in the way. We also had, as Regional Chief Bellegarde, discussions around resource revenue sharing and are looking to the Prime Minister for a commitment to develop a framework around resource revenue sharing, look to engaging with the provinces to fill out that framework, which would move to agreements between and among our nations and the Crown. We have a lot of our First Nation leadership that are here. We have a lot of our citizens that are going to be present tomorrow that are looking to the Prime Minister for the fundamental change and commitments that we need. We certainly recognize that this is just one day and this is one meeting, but we are united in our resolve to ensure that we seek fundamental change for our people, and we certainly recognize and hear the voices that are being spoken right across the country. So, if I could, in terms of the question about the Indian Act and getting rid of it, to be clear, the Indian Act is not an appropriate system of government for anybody, and it's not an appropriate system of government for our people. We have, and we called for last year, and are looking to the Prime Minister to support our First Nations rebuilding efforts that are currently underway at varying stages to seek to move beyond the Indian Act. Can we get rid of it overnight? No. We have to, this is where the hard work is, back home in our communities. This is the opportunity that we have collectively as First Nations and as the Government of Canada to support our nation rebuilding efforts, to provide the tools to enable our First Nations to move beyond the Indian Act. Currently, right now in this country, there is no mechanism when a First Nation is ready, willing, and able to do that, move beyond the Indian Act, short of a court decision or short of internal interminable negotiations, there is not that ability. We ask the Prime Minister, as we asked him 1 year ago, to stop with his neo-colonial legislative agenda that seeks to define our governments for us. Imposed solutions about our governments will not work. We ask, in terms of principles articulated in Article 3 of the UN Declaration on the Rights to Self-Determination, that this government support our efforts in terms of rebuilding. We have the solutions. We have the solutions right across this country in terms of developing and extricating ourselves from the Indian Act in terms of land management. We have self-government agreements. We have First Nations that are existing on a continuum of governance reform, and we look to the Prime Minister to support our rebuilding efforts. That is what is going to take us out from under the Indian Act. That is going to, as has been said, uproot the Indian Act tree, resulting in strong and self-determining First Nations governments. We look to him to make some fundamental commitments. It's too important. Our people can't wait. We hear the voices of Idle No More. It needs to be recognized. We need that commitment. Our people right now, in terms of governance, are shouting at the post-colonial door, looking for those solutions that we can jointly develop, recognizing the solutions that our citizens and our nations have. We are needing to sit down to get that access to our resources. The Prime Minister has stated he's seeking to unlock the economic potential in this country, $650 billion of investment into our territories. Our nations stand in the way of that. We have to meet. We have to have these discussions. So it's good.